Hi, everybody. It's Bob Phillips with Common Cause North Carolina. Again, coming to you via Zoom, and I hope you are staying safe and doing what's needed in these very unsettling and challenging times. Today, I'm talking with two more members of the North Carolina General Assembly, folks that I know, and folks who work together. They're from different political parties, but they do have a relationship, and they have worked together on a variety of issues. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Representative Clemmons, let me have you go first.
Hi everyone, I'm State Representative Ashton Clemmons, and I very proudly represent North and Northeast Greensboro and Guilford counties. This is my first term in the General Assembly.
Great.
My name is Craig Horn. I'm in my fifth term in the General Assembly, which means 10 years, perhaps beyond my best use by date. I represent District 68, which is Western Union County. Union County is on the southeast side of Charlotte, more south than east. I'm a House Chair of Education Appropriations, House Chair, or Co-Chair, I should say, Education Appropriations, Education K-12, and I'm the House Chair on the Joint Legislative Education Oversight, as well as the House Chair on the Joint Program Evaluation Oversight. I'm a grandpa of 7, a father of 4, but all of my kids and all of my grandkids are long since out of public schools and out of elementary and high school. My youngest grandchild's 20 years old.
Wow. Well, that's great. That's great to hear. You kind of touching upon what I want to ask both of you next, your different situations, and that is just a simple, how are you doing? How are you getting through this? And what are some things that you're finding that help you get through the days? Ashton, let me ask you first that question.
Sure. So I'm doing what a lot of parents across North Carolina are having to do. I have an 8-year-old daughter and twin 5-year-old boys. And so, like many parents, my days are busy between trying to do the work that matters to the people of our state and trying to teach. I just finished a lesson with my twin boys on how much pennies, nickels, and dimes are and how you add them to get money. So I think even this morning's an example of kind of what my days look like. We, as chairs of the COVID education response team, we had a call from about 8 to 9:15. I took a quick shower where I was interrupted by my daughter telling me my son had spilled milk and Cheerios all over the table. So then we cleaned that up. My daughter started doing her she's right now doing her math instruction from 3rd grade, and then I did some lessons with my boys. I left them drawing their picture of nature and writing a sentence to come out here and do this call. So I think that's kind of, that summarizes what our days are like, which I know parents across our state and families across our state are doing the same thing.
Wow, I'm tired even hearing all that. It exhausts me for sure to hear that. I'll be informal. Craig, if you will let us know how you're doing and how you're getting through this time.
Well, this is really not a big change from how things work for me anyway. I spend a lot of time in my office. I love to read, and there's an incredible amount of reading to be done just because of legislative challenges, but also because of my hobby of Winston Churchill. I read a lot. I write a lot of lectures and do some research, which is stuff I enjoy. The challenge for me is getting some exercise, getting some fresh air. We're often up and out or up and on the phone or on a conference call somewhere 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. And I find I'm still sitting in the same seat in front of the same computer screen at 8 and 9 o'clock at night. And just so much is coming at us every single day, 7 days a week. So the biggest challenge is fresh air and exercise. I don't know how Ashton Clemmons does it. I've got to tell you something. We all talk about our wives and the women in our lives, our super women. She is beyond superwoman. What she brings to the discussion with regard to legislation and education and COVID and all these other things, her ability to focus on those issues, bringing in her background as a principal, as a mom, as an educator, and then dealing with twin 5-year-old boys and an 8-year-old daughter. as old as I am, I can still remember those days very clearly. And I can still remember my kids dealing with their children that were that age and the challenges of doing that. And you see right now, she is participating in interviews. No, I think it just shows you what can be done. I could not do that anymore. My ability to have all of those things going on at the same time is overwhelming. But you have just, Ashton Clemmons has just stepped up beyond anything I would have imagined. I just really appreciate her knowledge, her willingness to work with folks. You know, we talk about the partisan divide. We hear about that all the time. But the reality is that we agree on far more things than that with which we disagree. Far more. If someone would just take a look at the votes in the legislature, how many are unanimous or very dramatically weighted to one side or the other, to a yes or to a no? It's incredible. So I just appreciate her. I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I will say, you know, the kind of joke is, and I agree everything you said about Ashton and just the ability to kind of juggle all that, but it's good that it's for the young. I'm like you, my kids are out, and I couldn't do it either. But I want to, you know, you both are touching upon this and how you both have reached across the aisle. Craig, you're a Republican. Ashton, you're a Democrat. You're a freshman, Ashton. Craig, you're a veteran, and sure, you know, maybe we don't always agree with everything, but then we can have civil discussions and conversations on those areas where we might not even have agreement. You all have demonstrated that, but I think people might be curious, how did this kind of relationship even happen? It may be something that most people, a freshman, a veteran, or Democrat or Republican. Ashton, how have you all developed this kind of connection?
I would say, first of all, thanks for the kind comment, Craig. I think at the core of my relationship with Representative Horn and other Republican education leaders, actually, is that while we may disagree on some of the policy issues, I truly believe that Representative Horn has the children of our state's best interests at heart. And so, and I think he trusts and believes that in me as well. And so I think we do best when we can come to any political debate or discussion understanding the shared value that we all have. And unfortunately, especially lately, across the political spectrum, we are attributing political differences or differences in opinion to differences in values. And I don't, like, I have been able, and part of it is honestly because I am new, and that I came with a passion for the children of our state, and I have tried to stay laserly focused on the children of our state, which has allowed me to keep that value front and center as much as possible. Now, politics is part of it. Craig and I have even talked about that, that sometimes you're on a team and that's part of it, right? Like, we are on different teams, and there are times where those different teams have needs, or, you know, you're doing something as a part of that team. But as much as possible, how we can have actual political discussions with an underlying intention of, in our case, wanting to do what's right for the kids of our state.
Representative Horn, what do you say about that? And what did you see in Representative Clemmons that made you feel like this is someone I can work with? This is someone I can talk with? Well,
I saw a willingness to listen and consider, not a, we haven't run into that. We both recognize that we work with our teams, as Representative Clemmons said, and that we've got to be able to maintain our credibility within our team so we have traction. But what I saw in her, as I said, is first a willingness to listen, a willingness as well to be candid, to not be suspicious or necessarily carry a particular agenda into a discussion. Now, I got to be careful about that because she does have an agenda. It's the kids of North Carolina. Well, you know what? That's my agenda too. Lo and behold. And that's one of the things that's just we've gotten so far away from in the General Assembly, and I'm not going to say in the General Assembly, in society. We've got these tribes, and it's all about the tribe. No, it's not. It's all about the people of North Carolina and delivering a quality education to every kid. Now, that's the values part that Representative Clemmons brought up. We're North Carolinians. We are taxpayers and human beings and parents and grandparents, in my case. We have great many shared values. So let's focus on those values and how do we accomplish good things for our constituency. And our constituency is manyfold. Our constituents are family. Our constituency is our community. Our constituency is our district. Those are people that vote and put us in office. Our constituency is our county. In some cases, district and counties are the same thing. And then as members of a General Assembly, and in light of our responsibilities as committee chairs, our constituency is the state of North Carolina, 10 million people. How do we move the agenda, quality education, forward in context of 10 million people spread out across a vast geography that's very different? The needs and the needs and views of the folks on the shore are quite different than the needs and views of the shore of the people in the Piedmont or the Triad, and certainly different than the needs and attitudes of the people in the mountains. It's all about balance and our willingness to consider that, I never thought of that. Politicians don't like to do that. Politicians like you to believe they think of everything. And we don't most politicians don't like being called politicians. So we've set aside the parochialness of one of those tribes, the political tribe, the partisan tribe, in favor of the bigger picture. Unfortunately, not everyone is either willing or able to do that. We have not let dogma creep into our conversations. Now, there are issues on which we have very different views, Representative Clemmons and me. But okay, that should not prohibit us from having very similar views on other things. The my way or the highway thing, we don't let it, that's not part of the deal. It shouldn't be part of the deal for anyone. Frankly, this is part of what's been now characterized as the COVID opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a COVID opportunity, an opportunity to transcend this political divide and focus on outcomes for kids or focus on issues that are good for everybody.
Well stated. I want to ask you both real quick, that shared passion you have for our public education. And again, I know this could be a long discussion, but maybe you could just kind of succinctly say, what are your thoughts about how we handle overcoming this interruption in these children's lives? Ashton, your children and all the children up to senior, and maybe there's not an answer yet, but I know it's something you both are thinking about. Ashton, why don't you have a crack at it, and then Craig, you follow.
Yeah, it is something that we are literally spending 10 to 12 hours a day, as Representative Horn referenced, in conversation with our state board, DPI, but most importantly, regular conversations with educators across our state. I think at its core for me is kind of two underlying principles. One is this has been an underlying principle for my entire life. So I was a teacher and a school principal and then a central office administrator. And that is a feeling that a 5-year-old born into the Clemmons family is no more deserving of a successful opportunity for a future than a 5-year-old born into any other place in our state. And our ultimate responsibility now, whatever my lens has been as a teacher or principal at central office, but now in the General Assembly, is what are the actions we take, especially in this given environment, understanding that there are kids like mine whose mom was a teacher and can sit down and teach about money, like I just explained. And there are also kids whose mom or grandma, whomever they live with, have no choice but to go to work right now because they're an essential employee, and they're 7 and they're sitting in a home that is not connected to the internet. And that 7-year-old doesn't deserve anything less than Bet Clemmons or Letty Clemmons. And so that's the first thing I have, is just this underlying deep responsibility to all of the children of our state. And second to that is an understanding that there are differences. Some of them are based on historical structural inequity. Some of them are based on our current environment. Some of them are based on access to internet. But there are differences in the amount of impact this response is going to have on the children of our state. Those are varying. Some of those are our responsibility. Some of those are just the way that things are playing out. And so what do we do with this underlying principle that all of those children deserve the best? What do we do based on our true knowledge, for lots of reasons, that this is going to negatively impact our already vulnerable children in more astronomical ways than it is some of our other children? So those are kind of like the two things I'm thinking the most about. And the other reality is, improving outcomes for kids takes resources in a lot of ways. And we are going into an environment where even the resources we've had in our state are going to be constrained. And so that's another huge factor. I think John Fraley is our other chair of our House COVID response. And I think, a lot of our time is trying to advocate that resources get directed to the children of our state.
A lot of very valid concerns, and as you say, a lot on the plate. Representative Horn, what are your thoughts?
This is the biggest challenge I've faced since coming to the legislature, is because it's a balance. I use an analogy. We're in the middle of a forest fire armed with a squirt gun. We've got to solve the immediate problems around ourselves, but we've got to do that in context of the bigger problem. In other words, that with a squirt gun, we're here trying to put out the fire so our own hind ends don't get burned. But at the same time, we have to realize that there's this bigger issue of the big fire. We need to put out the fire all at the same time. So we can't operate in a vacuum. Representative Clemmons brings a wealth of experience as a teacher, as a principal, and as a mom with young children. She has demonstrated a vision, a bigger view beyond her own family. And I think a lot of that's because as a principal and as a teacher dealing with kids from economic divides, social divides, ethnic divides, those are incredibly helpful and persuasive in many cases as to why we should do this and not that. As we look at all of the choices, the challenge among the many challenges are to make sure that we're listening closely, not just hearing noise, but actually listening to the kids, the parents, the teachers, the principals, the superintendents, and all of these thousands of alleged experts. And I say alleged because some of them are self-proclaimed. So how do we do that? there's no book. Oh, there it is. It's in chapter 12, page 7, line 2. This doesn't come with an operating manual. So balance is the key for us to be successful in this. A willingness to listen and understand that not all ideas come from one place, and try to understand, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you believe X is the answer? I'm big on civil discourse, and I've said, in order to disagree with someone, you have to understand that with which you disagree. We're not always willing to do that in the bigger picture. Part of it is because we're so busy posturing for the camera. Whereas here, as Representative Clemmons, Representative Fraley, and I get together with Britt Eller in the Speaker's office, and Freeburg McKinney in the State Board, and Superintendent in Onslow County, and at the same time we're getting together with those, we're all receiving text messages, phone calls, and emails from colleagues and constituents and people that just saw that we're sitting in a particular seat, trying to keep all that balance. It's an amazing, overwhelming challenge. At the end of the day, we're just still people. We're still people. And sometimes you forget that. We've got so many people looking to blame somebody for something. And one of the beauties of this relationship with Ashton Wheeler and John, we're not looking to blame anybody for anything. We're looking for solutions. That's all we're focused on, is solutions. And in order to find solutions, you have to have a deep understanding of the problem. What a solution to what? And what are all the aspects of it? And then the last thing I'd like to mention is the role of the legislature. The role of the legislature, we're not micromanagers, or shouldn't be. We often are not, because either politics or something else gets in the way. But the role of the legislature is to set policy and provide resources. Set policy and provide, not implement policy. That's what teachers do and principals do. Set the policy. Here's the expectation. And what do we need to do to help you at the level with the kids, at the operational level? What do we need to do so that you can implement the policy, you can reach the goal? And by us asking each other and others that question every day, we're moving in the right direction. But boy, it's hard. It's really hard.
I cannot imagine. And again, I know the people of North Carolina, to the extent that they know, can appreciate the very thoughtful perspectives that both of you bring to going about your job. Let me quickly ask you just about session. April 28th, there's going to be a convening of some kind.
Yep.
Are you all both going to be in town, and how does it work? A balance of doing the people's business, but also, your own personal health. And again, the body being a demographic that vulnerable. What's going to happen to the extent that you all know? Representative Clemmons, maybe you go first, and again, Representative Horn, you follow.
I would say Representative Horn should start, because I think he may know more than I do. I do think we have a responsibility to be good examples of what we're asking across the state. And I think we have to balance that with our responsibility. Like a lot of the things we've been talking about with education, they need to know now. Like our student teachers need to know that they're going to be able to graduate and get a teaching license, even though they couldn't do their student teaching all the way. Like, there are things that people need to know, and they can't wait until August or September or whenever we know it's safe. So I do think there's that balance. And I would say, from my perspective, there is good, thoughtful approach on how do we balance those two needs, which is the best that we can do. And like all leadership, as I watch at different levels, leaders are having to make really hard decisions right now. And if they're having to make those decisions, knowing that whatever they decide, people are going to critique it, right? I mean, whatever the decision. And so, where good leadership is made, you make a decision that has the best outcome for the most people, understanding whatever that is, people are going to judge and critique. So I think that's the best answer I have for now.
Representative Horn, you may have, a great answer, certainly, Ashton, but Representative Horn, you may have some insight in terms of what this might look like. I guess it's a fluid situation, but what is it going to look like?
Well, the plan at the moment, and then everything's at the moment these days. The plan is we are going to come into session on April 28th. We will be advised, as I understand it, come in and go to our offices. We will use some type of technical arrangement to convene the session. We will then have committee meetings on the 28th and the 29th. How's that going to work? Well, depending on the size of the committee, that will dictate whether we can actually meet face to face or not. And how do we ensure social distancing? And we want to be in compliance with the orders of the governor, the CDC recommendations, etc. So really large committees, is there actual physical space? Remember, we're redoing some of our committee rooms. So what we have available is what we have to deal with. So some of the key committees will meet, and there's probably only 4 or 5 key committees: health, education, transportation. So the key committees will meet, and they'll deal with some of the big issues that these interim committees, the COVID-19 work groups, have put forth. Then on the 28th and 29th. Then the 30th, the plan is for us to vote out bills. How are we going to do that? 120 people in the House. We sit 2 to a desk, if you will. That's not going to work. So how do we do that? Is there enough space utilizing the gallery upstairs where we could have people come in one at a time, go to a spot, and then cast a vote? And remember, we won't be able to do electronic votes if they're up in the gallery. So how do we do all that? Or should we have people come in, let's say 30 at a time, 4 groups of 30 each? Well, those are issues that are being worked out by leadership. I'm happy I don't have to deal with that. But the idea is that we will then vote out these recommendations. And now each house is going to have to wait for the other house, because the recommendations are, of course, now become bills that have been voted out, cross over to the other house for them to vote out. If they make changes, then they have to come back to the first house for concurrence, which may or may not happen. And then we've got committee, or we've got conference committee. So we'll have to see how all that plays. But the general idea is come in the 28th, meet as committees the 28th and 29th, vote out on the 30th, and go home. Avoid each other to the greatest extent possible. Avoid personal contact. So it's going to be, there are just logistical challenges that the staffers are trying to work out, and that involves the electronics of it all, and the physical health. And physical health is, again, you brought that up several times, Bob, about physical health, and that we need to keep that topmost in our mind, because if somebody gets sick, that scares everybody. So that's the plan at the moment, but everything's due to change. We'll see. Being
nimble, I think too, the right phrase is uncharted territory, I guess.
We hear that phrase every single day. We're in uncharted territory. Yes, we are.
I'm sure. Well, one thing too, and I wanted to just kind of raise, you all have been very kind, and how I have been to both of your offices in the past, and you both have put your name on redistricting reform proposals. And when I was talking with Chuck McGrady and Robert Reed doing a similar conversation, Representative McGrady said, you know, I had hoped that in April we'd actually even have a bill that might be heard in committee. Music to my ears. But let me ask you in this moment, is it even, I know there might be rolling sessions and it's hard to know kind of how all this works, but should this issue even be something, or could this issue even be something that you could foresee even being taken up because of so much that's on your plate? As much as I would like to hear you say yes, maybe this isn't the time, maybe this isn't going to, you know, happen, but would love to kind of have you all both, since you have been kind enough to put your name on proposals that were in the last session. What do you think? Representative Clemmons, I'll let you go first.
Are you asking, should it be in this April, like in this week that we're in April?
No, not in this week, but maybe before, in this summer session. And I know the old rule of thumb was you never take up anything controversial, which we know that's not necessarily the case. But, you know, I know that's not what anyone is thinking about. But when Representative McGrady brought it up, and he was kind of saying, I don't know whether that'll happen or not. And maybe none of us do. But maybe the question is, should it be, or is it just maybe this isn't this summer?
Yeah, I mean, as a strong advocate for a democracy that works for the people of our state, should it be brought up? Yes. I think it, and I think COVID-19 is, see, this is like Craig and I stick on education because when we get into other topics, we might have more differences. But, I think like the pictures of what happened in Wisconsin are not in the best interest of the people of Wisconsin. And they're not, like, I do not want things like that happening for the people of North Carolina. So do I think we should be taking any topic, especially when it comes to an election representing the people of our state, off the table? No, I do not think we should be taking it off the table. So that's my short answer. What that looks like as we move on, I don't know. But the right for every voice in North Carolina to count the same as everyone else's through an election, everything else we do is secondary to that, in my opinion. And that right and the need to protect it in some ways is going to be even greater in our current environment than it was before, even though it was already super important. So those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, it does create more challenges, Representative Horn, than what we would normally have, I guess. I mean, we all have to kind of be thinking about it.
Well, first, let me say there's not one thing that Representative Clemmons just said with which I disagree. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I say to you, it is amazing how much, really, if we get the nonsense out of the way, the puffy chest, the seeking power out of the way, get all that out of the way, it's amazing how much we agree on those fundamental values. And where we disagree is how do we accomplish those, protect those values and nurture them? How do we do that? So first, let me answer the direct question about a redistricting bill. No, it's not going to come up in April. We're going to get in, we're going to deal with the COVID-19 issue, we're going to get out. We don't have a budget. That's the next big thing for us as a legislature. We're dealing with a budget from 2 years ago, going on 2 years ago. This is terrible for education that we don't have an in-place budget. Terrible. Not just because of raises, but because of all of the things that are funded with non-recurring money, after school programs, et cetera. Now, right now, we don't have after school programs. So a little bit, sadly, the pressure's off. I said sadly, the pressure's off. Pressure needs to be on. We need a budget. We need an enacted education budget. I'm not chairman of transportation or public safety, so I'm not going to deal with all of those. We need an education budget. We need it right now. And I don't care about your politics. Now, redistricting. We need to protect the integrity of the election process. Undoubtedly, that's what Representative Clemmons says. That's what I believe. We need to protect it. How do you do that in a political environment? Because the reality is we're politicians. Again, I mentioned that before. Whether we like it or not, we're politicians. we may, and we actually do have some fundamental disagreements on what the structure should look like. And I've got to think about that as well. As do we really have disagreements on what the structure should look like, or do we have disagreements on how to get to the structure? We need to take this up. The people of North Carolina expect, demand, and need, I'm going to use a phrase that brings a laugh, fair and balanced, a fair and balanced elective system that protects the integrity of the vote and therefore protects the rights of every individual in our state. We need that. I am sure that Representative McGrady, who has championed this issue, would really like to see this happen before he goes home to stay. Or I go home to stay, because he and I are leaving the end of this year. I hope it happens. I'm not yet ready at all to throw the legislative year into the trash can. So, well, it's over, it's done. No, I'm not willing to do that at all. I think the majority of the legislators want to deal with these issues. Now, how they deal with them may be different from one side to the other, but I think we want to, let's get this done and put to bed. Why are we reheating the same beans? So, but it's going to take a number of things. It's going to take leadership, strong leadership. It's going to take the will to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. That doesn't make reasonable sense. It's going to take a willingness to actually listen to an alternative argument to whatever position we have. Perhaps this is part of the COVID opportunity. We can take the time to contemplate and to commiserate, and maybe as a result, cooperate. We've got, to some extent, this is a luxury to have this time, this opportunity to really think deeply about how do we do this and ensure the protection of the rights of every individual. I don't have an answer. We can debate all the time about nonpartisan redistricting. Is there such a thing? Reality. Because districting in and of itself is political. It's a political phenomenon. So can we really accomplish that? And that's an argument a lot of people are making. A nonpartisan redistricting committee, is there such a thing? Because how's that going to be appointed? Well, we're going to, we hear about rhinos, Republicans in name only, and dinos, Democrats in name only. So is there such a thing?
As always, the devil's in the details,
Yes, it is. That's exactly right.
I do appreciate again, thoughtfulness and civility that you all have always brought to the jobs, and these big things that we have to think about, as you all have touched upon too, the election itself in November, and making sure that we have a safe and secure environment. And I know that the SBE director has talked to one of the select committees, and I guess the presumption is we'll probably see an uptick in maybe absentee ballot requests. We just don't know how November looks like, but I know I hear from both of you, that's another shared interest, and we've got to make sure that the people of North Carolina can cast a ballot that they feel counts and not put their own health at risk. And no, that's obviously one of those issues too you all will be dealing with.
Oh, yeah, at some point, we won't be dealing with it this week or next, but we have to deal with it. There's an expectation from the electorate. Come on, guys, what do we elect you to do? Get up there and deal with it.
And I would say it's a place that it's great to have organizations like Common Cause and others who, like League of Women Voters. I mean, we have a few that really are focused not on the outcome of the election, but the appropriateness of the election, or the validity of the election. And those types of organizations are very important, because otherwise it does immediately get into you're trying to sway it for your team or your team. And actually we need people that are advocating that are not trying to sway it for one team or another, that are really trying to sway it for the people of our state instead.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And again, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, so let me just kind of close. And first, thank you both for your service to your own constituents and the people of North Carolina. You all, again, are marvelous examples of what two individuals, and I know there are many of your colleagues the same way, that can reach across the aisle and acknowledge differences and have those civil conversations when there are differences, but find the mutual common ground. And I'll just say personally, too, both of you have always been very accessible to me, the Common Cause lobbyists. And Ashton, to your point, I guess sometimes I'm labeled. We are a nonpartisan organization, but a lot of people say, oh, we know kind of where you're coming from. But I do try to bring to the door an objectiveness, and I know that's sometimes difficult to kind of see. But I appreciate very much how accessible you all are to everyone, but I've seen it firsthand. And again, just how hard you all work. The people of North Carolina don't realize this is far from a part-time job. It is not. And one of those things, and I know Representative Horn, as you are, and I'm sorry to see you exit, but I do wish you the best as you leave. But one of the things we hope to do, and I dare say this is not the time to consider it, but we need to look at how we can compensate the good people who are serving our state to be able to create more opportunities for more people to do it. And I'm not opening up that can of worms for a discussion with you all now, but that is something I hope we can do. But
it's a worry for us as well. Are we going to be able to continue to attract and retain high quality legislators, thoughtful people that can take the time, dedicated? If you're trying to raise a family, you've got or run a business, you can't afford to come to Raleigh for sometimes interminable sessions for 13 grand a year. It just come on, it doesn't make reasonable sense. I'm often amused that people say, well, you guys need to take a pay cut. From what to what? Are you kidding? This is a dead net loser. It costs more to be in office than we're paid. It just costs more. It's a dead net financial loser. But we do have an obligation to be open and transparent. We have an obligation to share what's on our mind. You as the public have a right to know what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking it, because I'm casting votes that are going to impact your pocketbook, your way of life, where your kids go to school, the roads you drive on, etc. I'm going to cast votes that impact that. So I have an obligation to you, the voter, to tell you what's on my mind, what I'm thinking. We're scared to death half the time to do that, because all that's going to happen, you're going to beat us over the head with it. The nasty emails that I get are just incredible. Really. Amazing. Sad. But we do have an obligation to talk to each other. And to each other is Representative Clemmons, a Democrat, and Representative Horn, a Republican. To each other. We have an obligation to talk to each other. Horn, a Republican, to the Democratic Party or Democrats across the state. We have an obligation. It's part of the deal. You, Common Cause, you have an obligation to us, the public, to hold us accountable. Demand that we be open and accessible and transparent. But that also comes with some responsibility. All of us have a responsibility to be balanced in how we respond and allow people to say what's on their mind without fear of retribution. But we don't all play out of that playbook. We don't sing that song.
I'll just end. I think a right question to ask is, do we have a system that encourage a diversity of voices and perspectives and backgrounds in the state legislature? I think that's a good question for us to solve and discuss another day. And I think it's right that the sacrifices are great. For me, I don't even think about it on my own as much as what I ask from my kids and my husband, to allow me to serve in this way, I would say for me, the honor is really great too. And it's not, every time I walk into the legislative building, I feel a little bit of sense of awe that of all the people in our state, I get to sit there and have these debates and cast the votes. And that's a great honor and a great responsibility that leaves me a little bit in awe every day. And it is made all, I will say that this COVID-19, the way we're operating with bipartisan chairs and bipartisan committees, and, you know, it's a little bit of a flame of hope, I think, because it has really been, at least I'm only going to talk about the education. I don't know what's happening in the other three, but at least in our lane, it is operating in the way that from my opinion, democracy was intended to operate. So, and that's been a tiring, but a good way to spend time.
That's so great to hear. And I want to thank you both again. And as we say, we hope someday we'll be able to actually meet in person and I can lobby you all, I guess, face to face. But please take care. Thank you again so much for your time. And we wish you both the best and your families as well. Take care.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.